Hello, I'm your host, Brian Callanan. National Guard troops have been deployed to protests in Los Angeles against the will of local and state officials. Could the same thing happen in Seattle? Plus, a member of the Seattle City Council has abruptly resigned, the second time that's happened in less than 6 months. What does that mean for the council? I'm talking with Councilmembers Joy Hollingsworth and Maritza Rivera about these questions and the ones you're sending in too. Next on Council Edition.
We put our gay community in a very tough position. We put our officers in a tough position. It was logistically kind of a nightmare.
We cannot oversimplify this issue. We need the more housing, but we need the permitting to go faster for whatever's being built. The infrastructure needs to be in place.
All that and more coming up next on City Inside Out, Council Edition. Welcome once again to City Inside Out, Council Edition, here on the Seattle channel. I'm Brian Callanan, very glad to be with two council members here in the month of June. Councilmember Solomon was supposed to join us. He's sick, hopefully feeling better soon. But with us is Councilmember Joy Hollingsworth, Seattle's District 3 representative from the Central District up to Montlake, also chairing the council's work on the Comprehensive Plan and the Parks Committee. Thank you for being here, Councilmember Hollingsworth.
Thank you for having me, Brian.
And we also have with us Councilmember Maritza Rivera, who represents District 4 from Wallingford out to Sandpoint, chairs the Libraries, Education, and Neighborhoods Committee, also heading up the Committee on the Education Levy. Good to have you too, Councilmember Rivera.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for having me.
I wanted to start, if I could, with something a lot of people have been thinking about here in mid-June, and that's political protests. We have seen the National Guard deployed to Los Angeles against the wishes of the governor and the LA Police Department as the Trump administration enacts an immigration crackdown here. The Seattle Channel viewer wanted me to ask you this. What is your position on protests in Seattle? What about SPD, the Seattle Police Department, cooperating with ICE, Immigrations and Customs Enforcement? What about if Trump activates the National Guard in Seattle or the Marines? The possibilities are real. What are you doing to prepare? Councilmember Hollingsworth, can I start with you on this? How do you respond to that?
Couple things. The first thing is that we support peaceful protests. I think that's an important part of our democracy for us to make sure that people are peacefully protesting. The second piece to that is that I know that our Seattle Police Department has gone on the record to say that they are city government, they are not the federal, so that connection with ICE, they have no connection there. So that's also has been on the record, has been spoken. And then the third piece, I think how I see my job, which I think is incredibly important, is focusing on local issues right now, making sure that government is still running here. There's gonna be stuff that's gonna happen on the world level, federal level, all different types of levels. The one thing that I know that we can control right now is what's in front of us, which is making sure the city stays operating day to day, and that's what we're focused on. Okay,
and I'm going to come back to you with that on that in just a second. But Councilmember Rivera, I thought it was very interesting to hear how our new police chief, Sean Barnes, spoke to this issue at a recent Public Safety Committee meeting as he goes through the confirmation process here. He said this about the possibility of the National Guard or other federal troops being deployed in Seattle. Here's what he said.
I will do everything in my power, I want to be clear, to protect anyone in Seattle from anyone who comes to this city with the intention to hurt them or inhibit their First Amendment rights. And what that means is, at some point, I will probably go to jail and be in prison.
The chief noted that a judge in Milwaukee was arrested by the FBI back in April for allegedly helping a man evade immigration authorities. I just wanted to ask, is this where we are right now? Are you afraid of getting arrested? I'm thinking about how the council is preparing for President Trump putting a target on Seattle.
That's a great question, Brian, and I was actually really pleased to hear the chief address that question in the way that he did, because it makes me know that he is committed to protecting the people of Seattle. You know, this is very real, what is happening at the federal level. Could we be arrested? Technically so, yes, of course. But you know, as Councilmember Hollingsworth said earlier, we are protecting people's freedom of speech. We support peaceful protests. I actually worked for the ACLU in the Wayback Machine, and you know, we need to make sure people have freedom of speech, and that we are protecting that. And I was happy to hear the chief talk about that. And to Councilmember Hollingsworth's point also, we are running the city and providing the folks with all the services that they need. In our city, we are a welcoming city, and we will continue to do so. And if that means we're going to get targeted, we will have to roll with those punches and take those hits.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to go back to you, Councilmember Hollingsworth, because in looking at the protests Seattle has gone through over the past several weeks, there were protests and counter-protests back in the month of May with the arrival of the Mayday USA protest at Cal Anderson Park. Mayday USA is an anti-abortion, anti-transgender religious group. They clashed with LGBTQ counter-protesters there in a rally that made its way to the steps of City Hall. I'm just kind of looking ahead here because there's a similar conservative religious group that's expected to gather in Seattle later on in August here, potentially at Cal Anderson Park again. How do you think the city handled this back in May? What do you want to see happen differently later this summer?
Logistically, Brian, we could have handled it a lot better. And I say that because this story got turned into Christians versus LGBTQIA+ community. And it's unfortunate because that's not what my experience has been with faith. I'm very open about, I'm gay, I'm Christian, I have all these different identities. And that's what it got spun into. It's hard because sometimes when people use religion to say hateful things or things that target a certain demographic and they weaponize the Bible and use religion as a backstop, it's tough because that's not what this conversation is about. This is people that were Christians that had a different opinion, and it's challenging because we put a lot of people in really tough positions. We put our gay community in a very tough position. We put our officers in a tough position. It was logistically kind of a nightmare. And I'll be the first one to admit that, and I know that we are, my commitment to the district is a couple things. The first thing is that I'm going to know about every event that's happening. So knowing about that event, August 30th, that's coming to Seattle, trying to figure out ways in which, okay, you want to come to Seattle, you want to worship, fine. Can we figure out a way that you can do that in a peaceful and a way that's safe for the community? The second piece to that is making sure we're looking to everything that's permitted through a public safety lens. How are we going to continue to protect people for their First Amendment rights, but also make sure that they're not targeting people with certain type of speech that's inciting a violence? So it's a delicate balance, and I know that.
Where do you draw that line?
It's hard.
What turns into hate speech, et cetera?
Yeah, it's when you so it's been documented throughout history and then legal stuff that's happened in the courts. But, it's also us just having a human conversation with people before something happens and trying to diffuse the situation. So we're going to try to do that and try to make sure that we're protecting people. But that our commitment from our office is to make sure that we're protecting some of the most vulnerable people in our city, which is incredibly important.
Does this rally come back to Cal Anderson Park? I know that's been a big question.
That's a question that we're going to have to deal with Parks because they are the ones who permitted this. So, there are talks between the executive and Parks to, try to make sure that this group can still exercise their First Amendment, but also not at the expense of certain people and our neighbors. So there's a delicate balance going there, and that's what we're trying to navigate.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Rivera, I wanted to talk about this issue with you because this point of crowd control is the last thing Seattle needs to check off the list to get out from under a federal consent decree, the federal oversight that's been in place since 2012 over use of force and other issues with the Seattle Police Department. Do you think Seattle is up to the test for this summer? What are your concerns about this season of protest ahead?
Yeah, great question. And I do think that Seattle's up to the task, particularly with our new police chief, or interim police chief. Yeah. I will say, Brian, that the freedom of speech is a fundamental right, and it's been well litigated in this country. And so, we need to allow for freedom of speech, and most importantly, for peaceful and safe expressions of speech. And so that is what we need to prepare for. And I will say, as a Jewish family, I've seen people say horrible things. And it is, I've had folks say things like, you should be dead because you're Jewish, all these things. And it is hurtful, and it's abhorrent. And even with all of that, we have freedom of speech, and everyone's able to say what they feel, even if it's something we do not agree with. So I just want to say, I don't agree with those values. I don't agree with the values of the folks that came to protest. And I'm going to say that strongly, and I'll keep repeating it. I will say, in terms of like what you asked earlier about the protests and the safe piece.
Yes.
I do feel, based on the chief's comments yesterday, I feel like we will be well prepared. He supports the freedom of speech, and he understands that we need to keep people protected.
He was talking about less is more in terms of police with shields, et cetera, that kind of thing.
And just, you know, making sure that there is, because there's counter protests also, which are also necessary. That too is freedom of speech, and we need to allow for both. And making sure that we have, you know, in the law, it is allowed to have I wouldn't call it somewhat of a barrier, so that folks can express themselves. And so what can that look like, and how the police can help with that in a way that is legal, but also gets to the public safety, and it doesn't escalate situations. Because I think when things get escalated, that is where you get the problem. People get heated, there's escalation, and then things can go in a direction we do not want it to go. So I do think this chief is well prepared for that, and it is something that, you know, we'll have to keep monitoring as the summer goes on. It'll
be a real test over the next couple months for sure. Councilmember Rivera, let me go back to you for a question about Councilmember Moore, who is stepping down from her position on the council for health and personal reasons. The council is set to have her replacement appointed by the end of July. Adding some context here, Councilmember Morales left her D2 position back in January, so this is the second time a council member has resigned in less than 6 months. I need to ask this big question here. What does this say about the Seattle City Council?
I will say that Councilmember Moore, I'm really sad to see her leave. We tag team representing the North End, and I've really enjoyed sitting on the council with her, and folks need to take care of themselves and their health. And so that's all I'll say about that.
Oh, I understand. I mainly was trying to ask it, 2 members leaving within the span of 6 months. I think a lot of people are saying, what's going on? And that's kind of where I'm coming from.
I can't speak to Councilmember Morales' departure. I can, and Councilmember Moore, we know why she's leaving. And like I said, I'm sorry to see her go. That said, I really enjoy my relationships with my fellow council members. And, you know, we're here to serve the people. I'm committed to that. We will continue to do that, and we'll have another process now for the next person. I think, Brian, you know, one thing to keep in mind is there were 6 new people when we came on in January, and so there's sometimes shuffling. There's council elections coming up. We had to do elections for an election for the last seat that we had to fill. So there's been a lot of moving parts related to some of that logistical things. And so that's something that we're managing for, right? But we work really well together. Like I said, I'm happy to be sitting on the council with my council friends. I call them friends. I consider Councilmember Hollingsworth a friend. And, you know, I think this council's done a really good job of, you know, sometimes we disagree, we agree to disagree, we keep the train moving forward, and there's a lot of alignment. And you can see that also even in the federal, with the federal government, what's happening. We are all aligned, and with the protests, et cetera. So there are a lot of pieces of alignment, and I am looking forward to finding the next person who's going to represent the D5 and who will be my new partner on the North End as we represent that end of town. Although I always say I represent D4, but also we all represent the entire city as a full body, and we care about the full city. So
thank you very much for engaging with that. Councilmember Hollingsworth, the person taking this appointed council seat would serve about 1.5 years, then face an election for a 1-year term in 2026, possibly a full 4-year term in 2027 if that person chooses to run. Do you want another caretaker for this position like Councilmember Solomon's doing with District 2, or meaning someone who wouldn't run for the permanent job? Who are you looking for in a replacement here?
Let me first say that Councilmember Moore has been a phenomenal colleague, a steady hand, a sharp legal mind, and we saw her heart every day on the second floor. This job is hard. Sacrifices that you have to make with your family, personal sacrifices, you know, the engagement that you have to have with the community, it's hard. We signed up for it, so we know what we were getting into, but it's not to also negate the fact that this is hard. So I want to recognize that, and you know, Councilmember Moore's health, we are wishing her the best, and just really positive health outcomes. You know, this is so new, and it's kind of not funny, but I joke, like, we've been through this process before, right? Like, we've done
times,
it,
right?
So we've done it, so we kind of know what that process is. But I will say that we're looking for, I know I am, I can't speak for my colleagues, but just, you know, someone that we can obviously get along with, that has wants to serve the city, has a positive mindset about the glass is half full always, and trying to build upon continuing to make sure that Seattle is a welcoming place for everyone, and with our values. So I think that's kind of what we're looking for. I can't really say, like, hey, you know, caretaker, non-caretaker, whatever, want the best candidate.
Okay. Do you have some thoughts about that, Councilmember Rivera, in terms of who you want to try to replace Councilmember Moore?
Someone who's going to replace the D5 and their interests and their needs, you know, which there's some similarities between districts, and then some things that are different. And so someone who's really going to work with community in the D5 and work with all of us and have a growth mindset as we all work together to tackle the city problems. So. And that's what I'm looking for, or what I will be looking for.
All right. Well, we'll see that process happening soon enough here.
Yep.
So thank you for that. One issue that Councilmember Moore was working on just before she resigned was a chance to change the Seattle City Council's ethics code. So this was recommended by Seattle's Ethics and Elections Commission here, which suggested council members should be able to simply disclose if they have a conflict of interest before a vote, rather than recuse themselves, which is the standard now. The Ethics Commission said when council members recuse themselves, essentially, in Seattle's district system, it can disenfranchise a lot of people. But on the flip side of this are questions from viewers that come along like this, asking this question: how can Seattle trust a council with members who are on the record for wanting to roll back ethics? I know there's been a lot said about this, Councilmember Hollingsworth, but I wanted to get your position on this ethics issue. Does the standard need to be changed?
So that was a bill brought by Councilmember Moore. I brought forth some amendments to try to, like I bring every time a bill comes before us, we try to always make it better. All council members have different point of views, different perspectives, and different interests that they're trying to make sure that they uphold. So we try to make the bill better. The question you asked, does this need to be addressed right now? Councilmember Moore thought it should be, and so she brought the bill forward. And our due diligence for District 3 office was, okay, how can we make it better? How can we be able to improve this process? Behind the scenes, I've seen how the ethics and stuff had behind the scenes, like what has happened with some other council members and some questions that have come up, and just that process. And so
it puts a lot of power into an unelected position there with the Ethics Commission. I mean, that's a big part of this.
It does, and some of the amendments we brought forth, we thought were trying to make it more transparent, more visible for the public, more open for the public, so they could understand, like, hey, these are the interests of the council members. So, you know, whether it needs to come back or not, it's not something that our office is looking into. I can't speak for other folks, but it's something that we try to improve upon with our amendments.
Okay, got it. Councilmember Rivera, a viewer wanted me to ask you this. Councilmembers Rivera and Solomon voted to pass Councilmember Moore's ethics recusal bill out of committee. Do they still feel that the ethics standard is too high? Is there any conflict of interest that should require council members to recuse? Any thoughts about that, please?
There are definitely conflicts of interest where you need to recuse if you have a financial interest in what you are voting on. I've recused myself in the past just because, you know, if my spouse sat on a board of something and I thought, and there was no financial interest in that case, but I felt I disclosed and then I recused, and I didn't need to recuse. I do think that this was something that the ethics director, Wayne Barnett, brought forward. It was something that he felt it was important. There are other cities that have disclosure versus recusal. I will also say, Brian, that we are all required to disclose to the city and to the state every year
Yeah.
versus disclosure forms, and people for transparency reasons. And people can go on and see all our financial records. And when you take this job, you really are putting all of your things out there for the viewer, as we should.
Yeah.
And I support that.
Yeah. Yeah, you're a landlord. I know this has come out in the news too. And how's that going to work with some of the different landlord-tenant laws that are being discussed right now? That was a part of this discussion too.
Yes, there was. My husband and I co-own a small townhouse with a family member, and so we rent that one unit.
And that would be an example of maybe something where you'd recuse yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for helping me break
But
that
I
down.
do think, Brian, that this legislation was not about landlord-tenant. It was broader than that, and it kept getting pigeonholed into that.
I see.
When in fact, it has come up various times, this piece about ethics and disclosure versus recusal. Like I said earlier, I recused on something that really I didn't need to recuse on, but there is a bit of, you feel like you need to recuse and not just disclose. So it was to bring some clarity around that too, and something that I will have to say predates us because
that's true. Yeah.
Yes, because Wayne Barnett had brought this to the council's attention in the past. It's come up not just in this council but prior councils.
Right.
So I just want to make sure people understand that.
Yes.
This isn't something we just brought this council. It was not related to a particular piece of legislation.
Right.
It's something that has come up in the time we've been here and that came up for prior council as well.
Thank you for that context. I think it was some people, maybe critics of it, would say the timing of it was tough because, like, wait a minute, we are going to be talking about these tenant-landlord pieces. We are going to be paying attention to what's happening when it comes to ethics in Washington, D.C. I think a lot of people have some heightened awareness of this. The timing of this, I guess, was difficult.
Yeah, but it absolutely. And I think also, too, and I want to just double down on Councilmember Rivera's point, was that this was brought at the behest of the Elections Committee with Wayne Barnett to Councilmember Moore, right? So this is what had been discussed for a while to try to improve the process. And I know that, the timing, that's what caught everyone's attention. And then, the message is always just as important as what the mission is. And that kind of just ran, just differently. And so anyways, I wanted to address that. But here's the thing. The bill has been pulled, okay? It is not on the legislature. It's not up for us to vote on, and it's been pulled.
Okay. All right. And we'll see what happens next.
Yeah.
That's thank you for bringing that point up. I did want to talk about something with you with the comprehensive plan, the committee you're overseeing here. So this is the roadmap for how Seattle handles its urban growth here. The council recently passed an interim measure to keep Seattle in line with the new state law that requires the city to allow 4 or more units on all residential lots in the city. And now comes the rest of the plan. One of our viewers wants to know this. Limited housing supply raises housing cost. Higher housing cost increases homelessness. Homelessness often leads to compounding challenges, job loss, mental health needs, etc., making return to housing hard. Is the mayor's comp plan proposal enough to dramatically slow the rise in homelessness fast? Help me out with that, because I think homelessness, housing, it's all on a continuum here.
For sure.
How do you respond to a question like that?
Yeah, we're doing our hardest, our best, to make sure that we're in line with the state. House Bill 1110, we passed the interim legislation, and I think one of the most important pieces that I feel like sometimes we kind of miss the mark on is not necessarily, hey, we just need to upzone the whole city and we just need to do this. That is not enough. What about the back end piece of the, how are people getting permit? How long that process is going to take, right? What city pieces are we putting on folks to hinder, right, people from developing and building certain stuff? What resources are we offering folks to be able to build? And I think House Bill 1110 unlocks an unbelievable opportunity for this city to grow and for people to be able to anti-displacement, to be able to stay, be able to age in place, also add to their property, whether it's lot splitting, whether they're building 3-4 units, whether they're adding an ADU, a DADU, whatever it is. We're looking forward to that, but we have to make it easier on the back end too. So it's not just about the policy lens of, a comprehensive plan. It's also a package of making sure that the city is doing everything in their possible realm to be able to cut some of the red tape that we have in the bureaucracy, right, for people to be able to build in their home, the technical assistance, the funding, the zoning, the time length, all these
design
different
review,
pieces. How much are we putting on Seattle Public Utilities? Like, you know, the hookup, the side sewer. We just had this discussion. I know it's one of Councilmember Rivera's. She brought a great amendment that
your
helped
favorite thing to talk about.
So all these different things. So of course we need to build more, right? And we understand that when you have less housing, you know, it exacerbates homelessness, exacerbates all these things. But we also have to make sure that we're doing it at the city level, cutting the red tape for people to be able to build as well.
Got it. Councilmember Rivera, I had another comp plan question come from a viewer aimed at your district. Eric wants to know this. Why is the Talaris site not being upzoned to at least a neighborhood center in the comprehensive plan? It is right next door to UW and Children's Hospital, and it is going to be redeveloped anyway, so upzoning there can happen without demolishing an existing neighborhood. It's in the Laurelhurst area. I know you know the spot too there. Some thoughts about this question here?
Well, the fast answer is when the mayor's office sent down the comprehensive plan, that was not proposed to be upzoned.
Okay.
And that's something that we're continuing to work with the mayor's office on these pieces in general. The neighborhood centers is an expansion. When you talk about HB 1110, the neighborhood centers is even more of an expansion. I believe Seattle is the only city that has this proposed neighborhood center plan because, you know, the city understands that we need more housing across the city. I do think, and to Councilmember Hollingsworth's point is, folks, we cannot oversimplify this issue. We need the more housing, but we need the permitting to go faster for whatever is being built. The infrastructure needs to be in place. So I think for folks that want more housing fast, they need to also understand that we don't currently have the infrastructure to accommodate that housing fast. That has to be built. And including, that's why the permitting process sometimes takes longer. We definitely need to make tweaks to our zoning laws to address having permitting go faster because that does slow down the process. I mean, there is a project that everybody wants in my district in Wedgwood, and we still, it will have housing. It also will have a grocery store that was there before that the neighborhood relied on that is no longer there, and that process is taking a really long time, and that actually has the support of the majority of the neighbors. Why is that taking so long? It's going to bring more housing and a well-needed grocery store. So what can we do on the back end to really help these projects along? That's what we're looking at.
Thank you. I only have a minute left. I need to do the 30-second version here. Council just approved this plan to add 30 digital kiosks to the downtown area, supplying news, information, Wi-Fi access, advertisements too. Do you want these in your district? Do you have some thoughts about this?
Yeah, yes, this was a mayor's proposal. Would love them in the Pike Pine corridor, but I have to talk to some of the business owners and find out. But it's a revenue generator. I know it's part of the downtown activation plan, and looking forward to seeing how they respond to our city and how people receive them.
Okay, some thoughts about this to wrap up.
Yeah, in the second phase of this, it's supposed to come to the U district.
Right.
So it will be in the district I represent, and the U district businesses are welcome. The BIA would like to see that up there. I think it's a great way to do wayfinding and some other things. And also, I think that the revenue generated will go back to help with keeping the neighborhood clean and doing some of the maintenance things, and that is needed. And so I welcome that, especially since my constituents are, at least in the U district, supportive of it.
Coming to a digital reader board near you. Councilmember Rivera, Councilmember Hollingsworth, thank you for joining me, and we will see you next time on Council Edition.